I mean, Scrum is all about transforming teams and transforming organizations, making teams much better teams. The biggest myth is that somehow by going through the motions of Scrum, it's going to enable us to perform at a much higher level. Practices in Scrum do is they create transparency, and they allow us to see very clearly what's working and what's not working.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Innovation Roots' interview series. And today I'm excited to have Pete Deemer with us, whom we have been seeing in the Agile community for a couple of years. And for the uninitiated, he is a well-known figure in the Agile software community. And he has spent the last 25 plus years leading teams building products and services at global companies. He has also served on the board of directors of Scrum Alliance from the year 2012 to 2017 and as a chairman of Scrum Alliance in the year 2016. Also, he is the lead author of the Scrum Primer, which is one of the most widely read introductions to Agile development. Hi, Pete. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thanks for joining in. And, in this discussion, we will try um, to explore some of the myths and realities of Scrum with you. And I hope the listeners go back and implement what we discussed today.
Great.
Uh, Pete, many a times we have seen that Scrum Masters, they focus too much on the Scrum events, right? Please share your views on having a greater impact by raising the team's maturity level and spending more time in driving the change.
Sure. Well, the Scrum events are obviously really important, but if that's all the Scrum Master focuses on, they're missing, most of the opportunity that Scrum presents. I mean, Scrum is all about transforming teams and transforming organizations, making teams much better teams and helping organizations become much more efficient, much more effective. And so, I think one of the challenges, too many Scrum Masters see, their role as this almost like a process role where their job is to tick certain boxes every sprint, and that's just an incredibly narrow view, and that's not going to produce the results that really high performing Scrum teams are capable of. I think the best measure of a Scrum Master is, can the Scrum team look back and say, we are a much better team than we were 3 months ago, and a much better team than we were 6 months ago. And the same too for an organization. Are we an organization that is a little bit more efficient, a little bit more effective? Have we started to address some of the organizational issues that have been getting in the way of teams? And so that I think is the real purpose of the Scrum Master. And the Scrum events are these moments in time where we have certain activities that together we're completing, and those again are important, but they are just one piece of the overall puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pete, we have seen another thing that people use Scrum and Agile interchangeably, right? So are Agile and Scrum same?
Sure. So the word agile, it comes from the Agile Manifesto, and it's a set of principles that really are embraced by a number of different methods, a number of different approaches. Scrum is one of those approaches, and so Scrum is an agile framework for product development. And so I guess you could say the word agile is a little bit like the category name. So it's like the word mammal, and Scrum is a member of that category. So Scrum is like, human being, you're a mammal. So Scrum is one of the agile methods. It's the most widely practiced agile method. And when people are saying, we're quote doing Agile. A lot of the time, what they're doing is Scrum or something kind of akin to Scrum. It might be what we call Scrum butt, which is where people think they're doing Scrum, but they're not really doing Scrum, and often having a lot of difficulties as a result, not getting the full benefit from it.
All right, all right. And I'm sure you have seen a lot of myths existing in the community, right? So, what are the most common myths in Scrum community you would like to burst today?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest myth is that somehow by going through the motions of Scrum, it's going to enable us to perform at a much higher level, deliver faster, cheaper, better, and so forth. And this is, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding of how Scrum works. Scrum itself, the practices in Scrum don't make us better as a team. What the practices in Scrum do is they create transparency, and they allow us to see very clearly what's working and what's not working. Scrum is a tool for transparency, for creating visibility and clarity. The problem comes if you get that transparency, but you don't do anything about it. You don't change the things that aren't working as well as they could be, because that's where all the improvement that Scrum teams report comes from. When teams say, we had this, dramatic improvement in our time to market, or we're producing much higher quality, or our customers much happier, it's not because they went through the motions of Scrum. They follow the practices of Scrum. That created transparency, allowed them to see all the things that were standing in the way of fast delivery, or things that were hurting their quality, or things that were preventing them from making their customers happy. But then they changed their practices to address those issues, and as a result of that, they got much better results. So the idea that Scrum is somehow like this magic bullet, and just by going through the motions of Scrum is going to make us better, it's kind of missing the point of Scrum entirely on some level.
All right, then, there is a ever, I mean, everlasting discussion or debate about who is more important, Scrum Master or a product owner. What's your view on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're both crucial. I mean, if the product owner doesn't have the right knowledge and skills, or isn't participating, then you're going to get terrible results at the end. If the Scrum Master is not effective, you're not going to get the amount of transparency that you could get. You're not going to get the improvement. You're not going to get the team working together as a self-organizing team. You're going to miss out on a lot of those benefits. So each of them is important, but in a different way. And to really get the full results from a team that's doing Scrum, you really got to have a product owner that's performing well, and you have to have a Scrum Master that's performing well as well. Thing is, though, if you're really doing Scrum, you're going to get transparency, and you're going to see if either of them isn't performing at the level that they need to. And that's one of the things you often get transparency about, is that maybe your product owner isn't the right person to be product owner, or sometimes you discover that the person playing the role of Scrum Master really doesn't have the skills or training or time available or willingness to perform in that role. So that's one of the things you sometimes get transparency about, is that you have the wrong person in one of these roles.
Absolutely. And with this, I have another question that's suddenly coming to my mind is, how do you identify that this particular person has the right skills to be a Scrum Master?
The right skills to be a Scrum Master? It's a couple things. I mean, I think it's partly about skills and partly about kind of personal traits. I mean, in terms of knowledge and skills, obviously it starts with a really deep understanding of Scrum, and not just the Scrum practices, but the kind of core concept of Scrum, which is about empirical process control. This idea of creating transparency, and then inspecting and adapting. And the idea that Scrum itself is this very, very lightweight framework, and within that framework, we use whatever practices we're using, and the framework itself enables us to get transparency about what's working and what's not working, and help us improve. So an effective Scrum Master starts with somebody who really kind of deeply understands that concept. It's not just about going through the motions of Scrum, but it's about really seeing what's working and what's not working, and then leading change to make things work better. Another thing that's obviously very important is this servant leader mindset. The role of a Scrum Master is not to be a boss for the team, but it's to be somebody who can serve the team to help them perform. So we want somebody who's really ready to help, somebody who's got great problem solving skills, able to help the team get what they need to perform. Somebody who is energetic and really has a bias towards action. Some of the biggest impediments that teams face, things that are slowing them down or holding them back, are not things with quick fixes. They're things that require maybe time and commitment and a lot of resourcefulness from a Scrum Master, maybe working with management in the organization or other people to help get those impediments removed. We need somebody who's really able to help the team learn to self-organize, and that is a special skill that takes a sort of a light touch. As a Scrum Master, you got to know when do you step in and make suggestions, and when do you hold back and ask, what do you think, and sort of elicit from the individuals their ideas, and finding that sort of fine balance there is, that takes practice. Something else that's really important is we need somebody with some courage. Scrum Masters have to be able to protect the team from outside disruptions and disturbances. We also need somebody with the courage to speak up. Sometimes speak up within the team itself and say, "Hey, I think what we're doing isn't working," or I think we're headed in the wrong path, right? I think we need to talk about this. And sometimes those are difficult conversations to have. So we want somebody with real courage who's willing to step up and do that. So I think those are some of the important things. I'm sure I've missed something. But those are kind of the things that sort of are top of mind.
Yeah, that's really helpful that you have highlighted these qualities, Pete. And thank you for answering all these questions, because now we are moving on to the next section of this interview, which is going to be a very quick rapid fire, so that we know a little more about you as person. So are you ready for this?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so any favorite quote you have which you would like to mention?
Yeah, it's a quote, and I don't know where it came from, but I think it's actually one of the kind of foundations, I think, for Scrum as well, which is, so the quote is, if something isn't working, don't keep doing it. Try something else.
Hmm.
And honestly, I think I think that's actually the single most common mistake Scrum teams out of the real world make, is they keep doing things that aren't working. They keep doing the same thing over and over again, sprint by sprint, expecting it to suddenly start working. It's funny, I was talking to a team, and they said they've been doing Scrum for a year, and they said they've been doing all of their estimation using story points and planning poker. And they said it just wasn't working for them. And I said to them, then why did you do it for a year? You know, why didn't you stop after a sprint or two and say, hey, story points isn't working for us. Let's try some other way of estimating. Because the thing about Scrum doesn't tell you how to estimate. What Scrum says is figure out a way of estimating, or figure out if you even need to estimate at all, and find what works for your team. And so if something isn't working, whatever you do, don't keep doing it. Try something else and keep doing that until you find the thing that works.
That's very important advice as well, Pete. Pete, you have any favorite time of the day when you're most productive?
Yeah, I'm a super early morning person. So I
Oh,
like to get up at the crack of dawn and kind of enjoy the quiet time before everybody else in the world wakes up. So I'm definitely a very early riser, and then I'm in bed asleep when most people are probably still having their dinner. So
that's again a very good quality. I think we should all imbibe. Uh, do, do, uh, do you have any favorite book or something that you would like to gift to anybody?
sure. Well, one of the books I recommend most often, I actually have a copy of it here somewhere. Um, It's this book right here, Slack. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Slack by Tom DeMarco. It's probably 20 years old now. It's not a very long book, and yeah, it's about 20 years old. It's probably the sort of most insightful book I found about software development, software teams, how to help teams be effective, and kind of dispelling some of the myths about software teams. One of the subtitle of the book is "Getting Past Burnout, Busy Work, and the Myth of Total Efficiency." And it's really insightful. And I'd say it's probably the book that I recommend to people and gift to people more than any other.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And how would you like to describe yourself in 3 words, Pete?
3 words. I would say curious. I'm always just interested in new things and finding out about stuff that, I don't know about. And um, I would say creative. I'm sort of totally separate from my agile work. I'm quite artistic, and so I have a strong sort of creative side to myself. And what else? I'd say enthusiastic. Um, I when I care about something, I put a lot of energy into it and have a lot of kind of positive enthusiasm that comes out of it. So yeah, I'd say those are maybe three words that kind of pop into mind.
Thank you. And do you have a cause which is very important to you?
Yeah, I have a number of them. One that it's an organization that I've supported for many years now. It's a Bangalore-based NGO. It's called the Parikrma Foundation, and Parikrma, it works with underserved children, children coming from very impoverished, very disadvantaged backgrounds, and it provides schools and meals. It provides community support to families, and they're just amazing stories of kids from very disadvantaged backgrounds going to Parikrma schools in Bangalore, graduating, getting fantastic scores on their exams, going on to university, and really transforming not just their own lives, but obviously the lives of their family, stretching out in many different directions. So Parikrma, it's spelled Parikrma. It's a great organization in Bangalore.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know about this. Thank you for sharing. And this is where uh, we come to the end of rapid fire. You have been amazing here. Thank you, Pete. And see, we have discussed a lot of things into Scrum implementation, right? From is it similar to Agile, and how Scrum Masters sometimes only focus on the Scrum events, some of the myths that you have highlighted, who is important, Scrum owner or product, Scrum Master or product owner. We have discussed, can we have something like Scrum owner as well? It just randomly came out of my mouth. But yeah, we have discussed couple of things out here, and I would like to conclude this discussion, Pete, with an expert tip from you about how can we identify a myth or a reality in Scrum.
Tell me a bit more about the question. when you say identify a myth or a reality, can you give me a little bit more on that?
Like while we are implementing Scrum, we blindly sometimes follow certain things that it is going to work, like
Mm,
blindly just following the Scrum events. But just following the Scrum events is not Scrum implementation. That's sort of a myth. How do we identify that what we are doing um, under Scrum implementation is going to work or not, or it's just not a theory? It should have some practical benefits as well.
yeah. Well, so the way Scrum is sort of was conceived is that it's the minimum set of practices necessary to create transparency. So we're doing short sprints, and by doing short sprints, that means we get results quickly, or we see that the results aren't there, but we see it quickly. We at the start of every sprint, we're planning what we're going to do in the sprint. So we create a plan, and then each day we do a quick informal check-in with each other. And then at the end of the sprint, we look at the product increment that we built, and we discuss it, we inspect it, and we adapt it. And then we look at how we were working during the sprint. We inspect and adapt our process or way of doing things. And so the Scrum events themselves are kind of as simple as you're going to get. I think what a lot of teams miss is that they go through the Scrum events, but some of the events aren't effective. And I'll give you one classic example. Scrum team plans a sprint. They decide on a sprint goal. They work to the end of the sprint. They get to the end of the sprint, and they're not done. And then in the next sprint, they do exactly the same thing again. And in the next sprint, they do the same thing again. And every sprint, they set a sprint goal, they get to the end sprint, they don't achieve the goal. And they keep making the same mistake, and they don't stop to ask themselves, why did this happen? And what do we do differently in the next sprint to not have it happen again? Or here's another one. The sprint retrospective, just is this, empty formality where nothing really gets talked about. And we get together in a room, we say, we're doing the retrospective, a few comments come up, and then we say, okay, that's the retrospective over. So we've ticked the box, we've quote done the retrospective, but there's no real improvement that's come out of it. So I think, this is the most common mistake I see real life teams making. They go through the motions, they do the events, they tick the boxes, but they don't have that deeper understanding. What is the intention of or the purpose of this event? And they don't ask themselves, is it serving its purpose? Is it successful? Are we successful? And what are the ways in which we can improve? And then actually taking action to do better. And this is the most basic sort of pulse check you can take of a Scrum team, is just say, are you doing better than you were a month ago? And if the answer is, not really, we're about the same, there's a problem there. A team should be able to look back to a month ago and say, yeah, we're better than we were a month ago. And they should be able to look back three months ago and say, well, we're much better than we were 3 months ago. So I think that's maybe, the best, test of whether what we're doing is kind of myth or reality is, are we improving? And the things that aren't working, are we taking action to try to make them work better? That's really Scrum in a nutshell.
Wow. Thank you, Pete. It was incredible to have you for this discussion, and I'm sure there are some great advices for the people who can go back to work and implement it uh, at their team levels or organizational levels. Thank you very much for being with me for this discussion.
Thanks for having me.